If you're like us, you've probably seen references to something called Munchausen's by proxy and been curious, without really understanding what it is or how it may affect people. That's why we were excited to hear about the new podcast, Nobody Should Believe Me.
The host, novelist Andrea Dunlop, takes an in-depth look at this subject. No one has ever done this before. She talks with people who have been affected by this condition. She even speaks with a perpetrator.
We've already listened to the first 2 episodes, and we can tell you that Andrea doesn't dwell on the darkness. She takes great pains not to be gory or exploitative. This show has heart. It focuses on the humanity of everyone involved.
And what makes this podcast extra special is that Andrea has a deeply personal connection to this subject. Someone very close to her was investigated for Munchausen by proxy. That gives the show a real emotional punch. When Andrea is listening to people tell stories about how they've been affected by this condition, she is not some uninvolved outsider. She has lived through the very same pain they have. She understands them. And through this podcast, she helps all of us understand them too.
New episodes drop every Thursday. Listen and subscribe to Nobody Should Believe Me on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Content warning. This episode contains discussion of the sexual exploitation of children.
In our investigation into the Delphi murders, we have published reports focusing on the activities of a man named Kevin Greenlee, who's charged with using the internet to prey on children. In order to better understand the subject of online predators who target children, we've talked with several experts. We've also heard from so many parents and guardians who shared worries about their own kids.
In March 2022, Common Sense Media, an organization known for reviewing media and technology based on its appropriateness for children, released a report delving into internet use by teens and tweens in 2021. We'll link to that report in our show notes. The report found that a total of 84% of teens in the survey said they use social media, while 34% said they enjoyed the activity. Tweens, ranging in age from 8 to 12, who participated in the survey were also found to have increasingly taken to social media, despite the fact that many social platforms set age limits. Between 2019 and 2021, the percentage of tweens who said they use social media every day jumped from 13% to 18%.
The fact is that the kids are online. Sexual predators are online too. So how can parents and guardians address the tricky subject of internet safety and security with their children and teens? How does one give kids the facts without resorting to fear-mongering? How can you establish better trust with your child? Today, we'll speak to another expert who will address how parents and guardians can take steps to keep their kids safe online. My name is Áine Cain. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
We first connected while looking into the Burger Chef murders, an Indiana cold case. Together, we built a spreadsheet documenting hundreds of cases of restaurant-related homicides. That original spreadsheet gave way to our podcast, The Murdersheet.
Now we maintain that same research-centric, investigative approach as we look into all sorts of homicides, including unsolved cases, historical crimes, and, of course, restaurant murders.
We don't just chat about the headlines. Our podcast is a platform for our journalism. The Murdersheet focuses on investigative reporting, thoughtful analysis, thorough research, and in-depth interviews. We're the Murdersheet, and this is On Internet Predators, how parents and guardians can keep children safe.
In order to learn more about this topic, we reached out to the National Children's Advocacy Center.
We'll hear a bit more about the NCAC in a bit, but to sum it up, it's a Huntsville, Alabama-based advocacy center focused on providing services, education, and leadership around the prevention of and response to different forms of child abuse.
We connected with NCAC Community Education Program Manager Beth Jackson for an interview.
Can you just start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, sort of how you came into this line of work?
Okay. So I am actually from Southern California, and I grew up in Riverside and went to University of California in Riverside, and thought I always wanted to go into social work or, psychology. And so right out of college, after graduating with psychology and sociology degree, I worked with teenagers in a group home. So that was that first big slap in the face, if you will, actually in the field. And it was funny because as a college student, I remember thinking, I'm never going to work with kids. I'll work with adults. And now my entire adult life, I've basically worked with at-risk children now for well over 30 years. So I moved to Huntsville, Alabama, and started out working at a Boys and Girls Clubs and worked there for almost 6 years. And now I've been at the Children's Advocacy Center for 23 years. And I've done lots of different things, which is why I've stayed, I think. I do program management. I write grants and manage programs and supervise personnel, and also help to implement some of our child abuse prevention programs. And with that came the fact that as the internet and social media kind of grew, we needed to incorporate that information, obviously, into programming with children and with parents. And so I'm one of the people that was tasked with that. And so that's kind of why usually when we get these requests, I'm the one that does it. Although there's another person, we sometimes paper, rock, scissors that. But, we kind of try to trade off a little bit. And then about 10 years ago, I got my master's degree in counseling psych. And now I'm a licensed therapist as well. And so I offer trauma therapy to children and teenagers who've been through child abuse, but also other kinds of trauma as well. So.
Absolutely. And I'm just, before we kind of dive into the topic at hand, can you tell us a little bit more about the National Children's Advocacy Center and the work that you guys do?
Absolutely. So the National Children's Advocacy Center, and I'm going to call it NCAC because it's such a huge bunch of words to say over and over again. Actually, the first Children's Advocacy Center started here in Huntsville back in the early 80s when they were seeing cases, like everywhere does, of child sexual abuse. And there was a group of people, and one of them is now our retired Congressman, Bud Kramer, who was then the district attorney of Madison County, or a district attorney. And he will recall now when he shares the story that it was a pretty heinous case of child sexual abuse that came across his desk. And he was interviewing the child about what happened. And the child was kind of like, gosh, do I have to keep telling this story over and over again? And so he, along with many other people involved with these cases, thought there has to be a better way to do this because it is not family and child-centered at all. So what they did is they created the multidisciplinary team. And that team is a collaboration of agencies that has anything to do with the case of child sexual abuse. So that would be Children's Protective Services that would actually bring the case to this team. That would be the district attorney's office that if it gets all the way to prosecution, they would be dealing with it. That would be the people that actually interview the children that have allegedly been sexually abused. We call them forensic interviewers. That would be law enforcement representatives because obviously crimes have been committed. So there's a law enforcement part to that. And then they also wanted to be sure that there were supportive services for the family. That how do they navigate this? Their kid has had an outcry. How do you support the family? And then obviously the child needs to heal as well. And so there needed to be therapeutic services. And so all of those people now come together with this multidisciplinary team and process all cases of child sexual abuse in Madison County, Alabama, and now have expanded to actually dealing with many physical abuse cases and severe neglect cases. And then obviously over the years, that now also becomes when there's a case, sometimes, not always, but a case of potentially a perpetrator, an online perpetrator. Homeland Security obviously gets involved with that too. So now we also have Homeland Security that sometimes is involved in these cases. And they'll all work together to process what's happened. The child will hopefully only have to be in a recorded interview once or twice. Sometimes kids take longer. We've got to change as kids change. And all those people come together to be sure that this case is, brought to whatever, completion that there is, whether it's prosecuted, whether sometimes, it's not founded, whatever that is, those people all work together instead of being separated out in silos. And so this in Huntsville was the first time in 1985 when the agency began. This was the first Children's Advocacy Center model, so to speak, that ever occurred. Now there's over 1,000 around the world based upon the model here in Huntsville. So we are not an umbrella organization, though. We are not. But we, through our Southern Regional Children's Advocacy Center and our international training program, we offer training, consultation, and support to anyone in the world, across the country or in the world, that wants to have a CAC model in their community. So that's which is kind of exciting that it started right here in Alabama. So now we also have some other services, which obviously we have kind of an international and national leadership within that field, but we still have our local services for Madison County. So we have therapy services and family support services, and we also have a child abuse prevention program where we do parenting classes. We have home visitation for first-time parents. We have a school-based child sexual abuse prevention program that's been around even longer. So we have a lot of different services that go out into the community.
That's terrific, that robust sort of set of different services. And I'm wondering in terms of, for parents who are kind of hearing stories about online predators and kind of wondering, how do I have this conversation with my children? What sort of advice or insights can you give them on how to open that line of communication with their kids?
I feel like it's a conversation with and not at. I really feel like, they get a lot of this where they feel like adults are talking at them all the time. I really feel like, especially within my therapy work, I sit down and I say, so what have you experienced? Ask them, what have you experienced? Have you had the creeper, that's approached you, the stranger? Because kids get so much stranger danger stuff. I mean, it's stranger danger, stranger danger. Well, I think that starting out with that, what's been your experience with strangers approaching you online, and what do you do? And they're pretty dang savvy. They're like, oh, we ignore them. We do this, that, or the other. When it gets more complicated is that the whole definition and our idea of friendship has really changed, I would say, especially over the last 10 years. Way back when, I can remember even going into a school and saying, so, the friends are the people we really know in real life, and the people you meet online aren't really our friends. Well, guess what? That's all changed. Because I have known plenty of kids and teenagers that pretty much most of their social life are people that they've met through gaming, on Discord, you name it, any of the apps. And so having that conversation about what friendship is, and that there are different kinds of friends now, and I think we as adults have to accept that. So just kind of grin and bear it and listen to what they have to say about who their friends are. And then talk about, even the people we think we know really well can manipulate us and trick us into things that aren't real. That they look at what you've posted online. They look at what things you may be going through, and they're like, wow, that's happened to me too. Or I really like that artist or that band, or I'm really interested in soccer or Roblox or what have you. And they make it sound like, gosh, they just know you like no one else does. And then the next thing you know, they're starting to kind of want to maybe start messaging you privately. That manipulation, we call it grooming too, but it's really a manipulation that anybody can be manipulated. And when somebody's trying to take you off the Discord server into a little private one, or take your Snapchat and like, let's start instant messaging or DMing, when, just watch out. They might be okay, but you know what? They might not. And they might not be who they say they are. I don't care if they've sent pictures or even videos. There's people out there that try to manipulate and trick all of us, including adults. And just watch out, because if they're too good to be true, they're too good to be true.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about the nature of friendship has changed for so many kids, because, it's really, even, I grew up with like Facebook, but now it's something completely different in some of these different communities. I'm curious in terms of, is there an age where these conversations should start? I feel like kids are getting on the internet younger and younger. And is there any way to sort of tailor the conversations based on age range, or is that really just dependent on the kid and their internet usage?
Well, I think that age range is important. Like, I think the first thing is, okay, well, what access do they have on what devices? And then, obviously, I think when they're younger, parents almost automatically kind of supervise a little bit more, at least I hope they are. And so I want to preface it that I think it's really healthy that if you help them limit or manage their screen time, so to speak, early on when they first get access, the easier it is. Put parameters around it. Talk about that. And again, let's say the gaming really starts pretty dang early. And actually, it used to be so many more boys gamed online than girls, but that's starting to shrink now. That gap, girls are doing it too. That, start with that, like right there, that, gosh, if somebody starts asking you a lot of personal questions while you're gaming, like, what do you think you should do about that? And talk about what are personal questions. I think sometimes we as adults assume they know what that is. Define it for them. Like, if they start asking you, oh, where do you live? And what school do you go to? And, where are your parents together? Are they divorced? Or as they get older, are you dating? Well, who are you dating? What kinds of things have you done? It's like, if you're gaming with somebody, and let's just say this is somebody you've not met, this is just purely a friend through, I'm going to probably date myself because I don't know that Fortnite's that popular anymore, but, what does that have to do with the game? That should send a little alarm off, like, okay, Janet, my little girl, if somebody's asking you personal questions, a little alarm should be going off in your gut, like, well, wait a minute, why does this person need to know that? It's not just about being nice, it's not about the game. So just kind of look for, help them recognize when something's a little off. And it's okay to go, oh, let's just talk about the game for now. Because, kids get kind of paranoid about, I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings or whatever. So you just want to give them some tools, and do that. But as they age and as they're getting into the dating age too, that there also has to be conversations about healthy relationships. And what does that mean? And the give and take in healthy relationships. And I'm going to say it, and I know that this is going to get off into a rabbit hole, but I won't go there because I know we don't have the time. But we need to be talking about healthy sexuality and relationships from all the way little, all the way up. And so that kind of helps preface some of these conversations about, what's healthy and what's not, and that helps them to have that filter to recognize when something's not quite right. I also want to say that when children are isolated and when children have certain risk factors, like if their sexual orientation, if they are struggling with questions about finding themselves with sexual orientation and gender and all those things, that puts them at risk to be manipulated, because sometimes they are afraid to talk to anybody, and they are going to try to find their people where they can. And so if parents are concerned about, gosh, I'm sensing maybe, my kiddo's kind of not sure about where they are, let's put our discomfort away, folks, and you need to have a conversation with them about it. about what's safe and not safe. And so again, I just go back to having regular, meaningful conversations all throughout their development. And that it can just be a, hey, I think you're really smart. So I'm not telling you this because I think you're stupid. I'm telling you this because I've even read stuff about adults getting basically scammed and manipulated. And I do the same thing. I'm careful too. And I just want you to be safe. That's all. If you see something in the news, ask them what they think about it. Get their input. They actually know a lot more than we give them credit for a lot of the time.
Absolutely. And I love that, about like setting boundaries and like making them feel comfortable. Like it's not rude to not tell people things. It's not, you shouldn't feel compelled to respond. I think a lot of kids, you want to be, when you're that age, you want to be nice and friendly and not hurt people's feelings, as you said. And so, learning that you can be nice and friendly and also set appropriate boundaries with people and say no when you're uncomfortable, I think is so fundamentally important for kids in general, but especially online.
And being careful about, even when you're in those communities, the one that always comes to mind so much for me right now is Discord, because that's what I'm hearing from a lot of my therapy kids, that they can go in and basically create their own server, and they have these groups and they tell each other all their personal stuff about struggles they're having with mom, dad, what's going on, mental health issues, if they've been a victim of some type of trauma. And then they find out that this person they thought they trusted is now outing them elsewhere. It's like, be protective of your information. And just because somebody overshares with you doesn't make it automatic that you have to share. So it goes back to just what we were saying. We need to build trust over time as friends and stuff. So, that's not something you need to talk about right away. But, y'all, they just give it all up like right away, from what I understand from a lot of kids.
Yeah. And I'm curious, in terms of, we talked about some great preventive strategies, like, maybe having these conversations early and setting boundaries around internet usage early on. Are there any other preemptive strategies for helping kids be safe online?
I think, again, it's I just can't stress enough in all the research, I know that a lot of times parents get very into the latest app and what they should do about it. But, there's always going to be a new app. There's always going to be something new out there. I think it's for parents, it's walking the walk too, that if you're telling and limiting and putting boundaries on the time that your child is spending, also as well, you need to do the same for you with your phones and your time. Like, you can't do as I say, not as I do. And again, I just, in all the research that I look at, and when I'm always looking to like update all of our information, and it's sounding like a broken record, but it is about the ongoing talks and getting their input on what they think is appropriate. Well, how much screen time is okay? And what are they using it for? I read an interesting article just yesterday about, don't assume it's all bad, right? There's really great things about the internet and social media. There's like some great things. As a side note, there's some things I really hate, but there are some great things. So talk about also their interests and what they do like. Ask them, what are your favorite things? What are the things that make you uncomfortable and you don't like? Do you ever need me to be the bad guy to give you permission to check out sometimes and get off, because they feel so much pressure to always be connected because they're going to miss out from the social circle stuff. Even with people they know and their friends, they're going to miss out somehow if they disconnect for a little while. And so really trying to be a partner with your child in that, and that if you come and tell me something that's happened, I'm not going to necessarily take your access away, because that is the number one reason kids don't talk to adults. They're afraid, oh my God, if I tell them that some person asked me for an inappropriate, a nude, video or picture or whatever, mom's never going to let me on my phone or my computer again, so I know you're going to have your moment, but praise them for coming and talking with you. Like, let them know, look, I want you to come to me. It doesn't mean we're going to take it all away. Something goes down, please come talk to me, because it doesn't, I want to help and support you. And the more you can be honest with me, the more I'm going to trust you too. that, gosh, you made the right decision. So, gosh, look at that. So guess what? We may have to put some more, filters or some protections on, but you're not going to lose all your access.
Right. You're not going to be being punished for something.
Yeah, because that is the fear. That is the fear with anything. And especially even if they have done something. So let's say the genie's out of the bottle and they've maybe sent some inappropriate material to somebody, because we know it happens a lot. It is the whole, kids don't call it sexting. It's just sending nudes, video and pictures. That the bottom line is, if something ever happens, just trust me enough that we can help you solve the problem. Understand that sextortion happens where somebody could get some of your information, get some of your nudes, and then try to either get money or more nudes from you. We need to be real with kids and say, this is stuff that really happens right here in our community. Come and talk to me, because nothing's worth you being victimized, period. So try to stay away. And if it does happen, because I know you have had that, if they're a victim, try to stay away from the shame. Why did you do that? Try. It's hard. I know it's hard because you're in the moment, but don't shame and guilt. Remember, the teen brain is not done cooking. They may look like they're grown, but they're not. Now they're saying what men's brains don't finish maturing till age 25, 26, and women 24, 25 now. I know sometimes even in my office, I have to pinch myself when I look at my teen client, like, okay, they look like they're 20 or they look grown. They're not. Their brains, they're in a stage of development, being teenagers and kiddos too. Remember, because now we're seeing younger and younger ages getting, doing some of the same things, that their brains are not done developing yet. And that prefrontal cortex that is our thinking and problem solving part is the last part to finish developing.
I know we've heard from a lot of parents who are kind of like, I think, we don't really want to talk about sextortion. Like, it's squeamish. Like, we don't even want to go there.
Are we really, down the sex ed road? That's why we don't want to talk about sex ed, right? So I'm sorry, I won't get on you tell I have to pull myself back. You know what? This is your parent, and if you're going to allow them to have the access and have the devices, you're going to have the conversations, because you know what? If you don't, someone else will and might not give them the right information.
Absolutely.
It puts them at risk. It puts them at risk for victimization if they don't have the right information. It doesn't mean they're going to go do it. I think that's the whole thing. Well, gosh, if we tell them about it, that's giving them the green light. No, it's not. It's you want them to have the right information from you, and you want to be the go-to person. If you're not willing to talk about it, why are they going to come and talk to you about if something goes down, if you haven't even had the conversation about it?
Absolutely. And and you mentioned the guilt and shame and how that really is not helpful when something has happened. Are there any other measures that parents should be taking when they find out that, as you said, the genie is out of the bottle and something has happened, to really be there to support their kids in the aftermath of such an event?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I think it's trying to give them a little bit of control back, that, okay, we're going to contact the provider, however they, met this person or whatever, we're going to contact the provider, and we're going to see about, shutting some stuff down. We're also going to contact law enforcement because we want to keep you safe. And most likely, one of the powerful thing I feel like that sometimes helps kids is that you're not alone. You're not alone when these things happen. You're not the only person this has happened to. This has happened to lots of different people of all walks of life, and you're not alone in this. And so we need to take the steps to keep you safe and other kids and teenagers safe as well. And then if and when needed, seek out family therapy, seek out a therapist for the kiddo to support them, because that's a traumatic event and they may need some help processing that and moving on. And again, try to just stay away from the blame, and for the parent, go talk to your own therapist too, if you need to. I get it. It's like, even in the best of circumstances, sometimes you talk to kids, you tell them, and they have a bulletproof shield. We all did. We hit puberty, and all of a sudden that bulletproof shield goes up, and it's like, well, I know, I hear about that, but it won't happen to me, and I think we all still have a little bit of that, right? Yeah. I don't care how old we get. And so it's about, hopefully it won't. but we just want to be prepared that it could. So I want you to have all the information to make the best choices that you can, informed choices.
And then I guess my other question is, like, thinking about the teen social nexus, if your teenager comes to you and talks about their friend possibly going through something that sounds like it could be a situation with an internet predator, how should parents deal with that? And kind of like, your teen might have been told that in confidence, but might be concerned enough. Like, is there a delicate way to handle that you're protecting the kids, but you're also not, making it worse somehow?
So I think it's really what they do. Praise them for coming and talking with you about it. Talk about how dangerous of a situation it is. I mean, that teenager probably has that idea if they've actually come and talked to you, and then brainstorm about how they can help that other kid. Even if it's initially like, let's go tell them, come and talk to me first and let's figure this out, ultimately to get to that kiddo's caregivers next. And then law enforcement and doing all those things to help stop the victimization, if at all possible. So I think it's, again, try not to take over, pull them in and take it step by step together about how they can problem solve.
And then I guess, are there any signs that kids might be going through something, whether it's an online predator or some sort of in real life predator, and like a negative situation, and what you can be looking for? Obviously, I imagine some kids don't show any signs, but are there things that maybe parents can be on the lookout for, changes in their kid that are not just explained by going through puberty and things like that?
I think it would be their behavior. Parents know their kids better than anybody else most of the time. Although I always like to say the secret life of teenagers, what can we say? But if, you're noticing that they're minimizing screens a lot, as soon as you walk in the room, you're noticing they're becoming a lot more isolating themselves more, not being interested in things that they used to be interested in, not going and meeting with friends and doing things like that, drops, becoming disinterested in the typical school stuff. Just, again, they know their kiddo. Don't just assume, especially if a kid was pretty social to begin with, and all of a sudden they're just more and more isolating. That to me would be a big red flag. What's up with that? If they're really secretive about what they are doing, what's going on with that? And so on. So again, looking just for any changes in their behavior that's pretty out of the ordinary for them. Because again, I know kids like to spend a lot of time in the room, but if they're spending even more time and letting, all those other things that they used to like to do go, that's a pretty big red flag.
Absolutely. And this is not really an online predator situation. It kind of is, but it's a listener question that we got that was basically their I guess a child's friend's father turned out to, recently have been arrested for child sexual abuse materials charges. And they're kind of, this horrified realization that this, person who may have been in contact with our child turned out to be a predator, and, not noticing any different behavior in their kid. But is there a way to talk with their kid about that and ask questions without, leading them? There's always that concern that you're going to, put an idea in your kid's head. And then at the same time, in that case, law enforcement never reached out to them. So it sort of seems like it's probably, that was our interpretation, that if law enforcement didn't reach out, it's probably okay. But just a very upsetting realization for a parent to have, obviously.
Well, and most likely, I'm going to take a guess that the kiddo figured out what was going on too, because, we think they don't know, but they do. I mean, they do. They're pretty dang smart and they pay a lot of attention. So I think you could start off with, and this is kind of a sticky widget, because if something did happen, you certainly don't want to muddy, so to speak, the forensic interview. But I think it could even just be that, gosh, this, so are you aware of what's happened with, Robert's dad? And, again, let the kid kind of talk and just be like, wow, this is such a hard thing, child sexual abuse. And hopefully they've already had a conversation about this, about sexual abuse prevention safety. But, I just want to let you know that no matter what, nobody's supposed to be touching you. And I'm going to use the parts names, on your penis or your butt. And if it's a girl, your breasts, your vagina, your butt. Nobody is supposed to be touching you except for keeping you safe and healthy. Like when you go to a doctor or we're changing diapers, like you can start to have that conversation with them and then just be like, this just made me think, gosh, has anybody ever done that to you? And if they're, yeah, well, and then that's all you got to do. You just go, okay, wow, I'm so glad you told me. You're so brave. It's not your fault. We're going to get some help for this. And that's it. That's it. Don't why, what, where, when questions, just like, and I can't even imagine a parent being in that place, because you would want to do that. But if at all possible, focus on the kids' mental health of, they've been keeping a very horrible secret, right there, that they probably feel guilty and somehow it's their fault and they're ashamed, because most kids blame themselves because they never told, if they haven't. And so it's about the kiddo. It's like, what can we do to help them? So it's very simple. Once you know if something has happened, and then you report it. You go ahead and report it to your local CPS or law enforcement.
And I imagine that, in terms of your own reaction in instances like that, whatever the conversation is, as horrifying and as unthinkable it is for a parent to hear that, I would presume it makes sense to try to keep your emotions in check so you're not re-traumatizing the child by freaking out, essentially.
Absolutely, if you can. I know that's much easier said than done. Much easier said than done. And anger too. Remember, anger, even if you think, gosh, I'm angry at the perpetrator, again, kids are going to see it and they're going to be like, whoa, 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 whoa. So just try to keep that in check and store it away until you can have that moment with yourself and with another family member or friend to support you, because it's about the kiddo. It is hard. I can't even imagine what that would be like. Don't beat yourself up too much. And if you've had not the great reaction, go back and say, I'm so glad. You can always go back and say, I'm sorry. I know mom got really mad and upset, and it wasn't at you. Just clarify. We make mistakes. I love you so much. I just was so angry that this happened to you, and I'm so hurt that this happened to you. And I'm so glad you told me. You can always go back too. So, and just explain.
Going back to the online predator subject, this is something I often say, like on the show, or I just kind of think to myself, and I think it's probably not a helpful reaction, but I'm just curious, if you see any sort of movement in this. But like, part of me is like, you often hear about tech founders not letting their kids be very involved in their phone for a long time. Like sometimes I'm just like, no phones until they're 20. And that's not, I think that's probably pretty unrealistic in this day and age. But is there any sort of movement to really sort of try to protect kids more from online exploitation, that could happen within tech, or that you are seeing on the ground, sort of any of those discussions taking place?
A lot of discussions are taking place. If it was Beth's world, and okay, I'll put myself out there, I wish we could just go back to them having flip phones, the very first phones when it was just text and talk. That was it. No internet access, no nothing. But I don't see that happening. I think the genie's out of the bottle. And so it's the best way to fight this, or just manage it, so to speak, is going to be where we, hopefully empower parents and caregivers to keep talking with their kids about this and not be squeamish about it. We got to quit being squeamish about it. They're smart, give them some credit. But again, and it's even teenagers, sometimes they want the guidance. They won't admit it, but yes, they do. I've even had them admit it to me in my therapy office. They listen more than we think they do. So and it doesn't have to be the hour-long lecture. Choose your moments. It can be when you're driving in the car, and be like, gosh, I heard about this story where this happened. What do you think about that? It can be little, like 5-minute snippets on and off, and that way, the more you do it, the more they're kind of used to it. And even if they do this, oh, mom, it's just like, well, I was just really kind of curious. Oh, I'll ask you later after dinner, just use your time wisely. Is there a movement? I hear people talk about it, but I laughed when I saw, who is it? Somebody's right now, just now, advertising like it's a big new thing to go back to the flip phone, with the thing. And I laughed and I thought, well, still has internet access, so it doesn't do us any good. But I think, again, it's going to be education is going to be the way to go.
Yeah.
And again, now I will put the caveat in there because I think parents are going to be like, I can't believe she didn't talk about spying software. So, a lot of your cell phone providers, they have, I'm not going to endorse one. There's so many different watchdog things out there. If you really want to have your kid's phone locked down, I think that's absolutely fine. That's your right. Go ahead and talk with your service provider, and they'll have ways that you can monitor everything that they do, whatever they post, whatever apps. They got to get permission to get certain apps on their phone. They got to do all of that. So I say go for it. Definitely go for it, especially when they're younger, probably. And then, though, as but don't think that takes the place of talking with them, because it doesn't, because kids are amazingly smart at getting around all those blocks. They tell me how they do. So and guess what? They go over to other people's houses, they're at school, and they get on other people's phones and do stuff. So it's never going to take the place. Spying on them is never going to take the place of talking with them. You could probably do a little bit of the spying and a lot of talking with.
That makes a lot of sense. And the spying, probably doing that alone and intensively, I imagine, would just kind of, not establish great trust, because you're basically telling them, I can't trust you and I just have to watch you, basically.
Yeah, and they're going to go underground. They are. And let me tell you, they can do it. I have them tell me all the time in my office how they get around the blocks at school. They know how to do it. We're talking like 9-year-olds. Mm-hmm.
It's terrifying. Well, this has been so incredibly insightful. Is there anything around this topic that we didn't ask you about that you think it's important for parents to know about or mention? It's a huge topic, but I feel like I love the insights you gave. It feels very actionable for people to, put in place to their own life and families.
I think I'm just looking through my notes. What I'll do is I'm going to email you just some resources that you can maybe post for people. Some of the really good ones from like National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, connectsafely.org, and Common Sense Media. And I'll send the names, plus the links and such, so that you can post and people have them handy, because there are so many, but these are my go-tos that, like, when I need, again, when I try to stay updated because it's changing all the time, these are the places I go.
Thanks to Beth for her great insights, and thanks to the NCAC for connecting us for the interview.
Thanks so much for listening to the Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Greenlee, who composed the music for the Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening.